There was a time, and I need you to really sit with this, when a human being could look at a tree with 7 apples on it and not think 7. They didn't count them, they didn't estimate, they didn't file the number away for later, they just saw apples, red ones, hungry-making ones, that's it. No 7, no quantity, no abstraction. And then somewhere in Africa, roughly 20,000 years ago, someone picked up a baboon bone, held a sharp piece of quartz and scratched a line into it. And another, and another. And everything became possible. Money, schedules, debt, the 9 to 5, your credit score. The reason you feel guilty sleeping past 7 a.m. All of it started with a scratch on a bone. I'm going to show you something in this video that I don't think anyone on YouTube has fully connected. Not just who invented zero, that's the boring version. I mean the full cascade. How counting literally rewired the human brain, invented money, created time as we know it, and ultimately built the anxiety machine you're living inside right now. So stay with me, this gets weird and it gets personal. In 1950, a Belgian anthropologist named Jean de Heinzelin was digging near Lake Edward, right on the border of what is now Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, when he found something that shouldn't have been that interesting. A bone, about the size of a pencil, dark brown, baboon fibula. But this bone, now called the Ishango bone, had something on it. 3 columns of notches, deliberate, organized. And when you actually look at the math, the first column, groups of 19, 17, 13, and 11 notches. That's not random. Those are the prime numbers between 10 and 20. The second column, doubling patterns, 3 and 6, 4 and 8. The third, it all sums to 60. Now this thing is roughly 20,000 years old, maybe 25,000. And there's an even older one, the Lebombo bone, found in South Africa, about 44,000 years old, with 29 notches that almost perfectly match a lunar cycle. Here's what blows my mind, though. Some researchers, including the mathematician Claudia Zaslavsky, think the person who carved the Ishango bone might have been a woman, tracking her menstrual cycle against the moon. Think about that. The first accountants, probably women. The first mathematicians, not some guy in a toga, a woman in Central Africa 20,000 years ago trying to understand her own body. And in doing so, she accidentally invented the technology that would eventually build Wall Street. But here's the gap no one talks about. Before this bone, human brains didn't process the world numerically. Not really. We had what neuroscientists now call an approximate number sense. The ability to look at 2 piles of berries and know which one is bigger. Even babies can do that. Even some animals can do that. But exact numbers, abstract numbers, the idea that 7 exists as a concept independent of 7 actual things, that is a completely different brain operation. And it required a scratch on a bone. Stanislas Dehaene, he's a French neuroscientist, one of the best in the world, has spent his career studying what happened to our brains when we started using numbers. And his conclusion is both obvious and terrifying. Our brains did not evolve for math. Seriously, there is no math lobe in your head. What happened instead, and Dehaene calls this neuronal recycling, is that our brains hijacked existing machinery. Specifically, a fold in your brain called the intraparietal sulcus, the IPS, which originally evolved to help you track objects in space, estimate distances, maybe judge how fast a predator was moving. That got repurposed, recycled, turned into a number processor. And here's the wild part. The right side of your IPS handles the rough, intuitive stuff, about this many. But the left side, that's where exact arithmetic lives, where 7 minus 3 equals 4, where you learn multiplication tables. And that left side development, it only happens because of education, because of culture, because someone taught you. So when that person in Ishango scratched those notches, they weren't just keeping records. They were forcing a brain region to do something it was never designed to do. They were running software on hardware that didn't support it. And it worked. But then we kept pushing it. Because around 2,500 years ago, Babylonian traders did something even stranger. They invented a placeholder, Two little slanted wedges in clay that meant nothing, zero. Not nothing as in absence, but nothing as a number, a mathematical object, and your brain hates this. Studies show that children take longer to understand zero than any other number. Adults take longer to read it. Your brain needs more neurons to represent zero than it needs for, say, 3 or 4. Because zero requires you to create something out of nothing, to treat absence as a quantity. As neuroscientist Andreas Nieder put it, it took an eternity until mathematicians finally invented zero as a number. And I think that's beautiful. But I also think it's where we started to lose the plot. Here's the gap that almost every YouTube video misses. They'll tell you about the Ishango Bone. They'll tell you about zero. And then they'll jump to, and that's why math is cool. No, the real story is what happened when we took these abstract numbers and started using them to measure everything, including things that shouldn't be measured. Take money. You probably learned in school that money was invented because barter was annoying. I'll trade you 2 chickens for a cow, but you don't want chickens, so we need a medium of exchange. That's a fairy tale. Anthropologist David Graeber proved this pretty conclusively. No one has ever found a pure barter economy. Not one. What actually happened is that credit came first. Debt came first. In ancient Sumer, around 3500 BC, people were keeping ledgers of who owed what long before anyone minted a coin. And when coins finally did show up, Graeber argues they were invented to pay soldiers, to fund wars. Money was born from state violence, not convenience. Think about what that means. Numbers, which started as scratches tracking the moon or maybe a menstrual cycle, became a way to quantify human obligation, to turn social trust into a balance sheet, to make relationships countable. And then we did the same thing to time. E.P. Thompson, British historian, wrote what I think is one of the most important essays nobody reads anymore. It's called Time, Work Discipline and Industrial Capitalism. And in it, he describes something that should break your heart. Before the Industrial Revolution, most humans lived by what Thompson called task orientation. You planted when the soil was ready. You harvested when the crops were ripe. You ate when you were hungry. You slept when you were tired. Time was natural, it was past, like weather. But industrial capitalism needed something else. It needed time orientation. It needed workers who would show up at 6 a.m., not because the sun was up, but because a clock said so. Factory owners literally manipulated clocks. They'd set them forward in the morning and back at night to steal labor. Workers who carried watches were sometimes fired for knowing too much about the science of horology. And Thompson writes this devastating line, "Time is now currency. It is not past but spent." Lewis Mumford, another brilliant historian, argued that the clock, not the steam engine, was the key machine of the industrial age. Because once you can measure time precisely, you can regiment it. You can sell it. Timed payments, timed contracts, timed work, timed meals. From this period on, nothing was quite free from the stamp of the calendar or the clock. And here's where I want to get personal for a second. I want you to think about your average Tuesday. You wake up to a number 7:00 a.m. You check another number, your bank balance. You eat a measured number of calories tracked by an app. You walk a measured number of steps. You answer emails measured in response time. Your worth at work is measured in output. Your worth online is measured in followers. Your sleep is measured in hours and REM cycles. You have become quantified. And this isn't an accident. This is the final stage of the cascade that started on that baboon bone. Philosopher Byung-Chul Han, he's a Korean-German thinker who writes about burnout and modern exhaustion, describes our current condition as an achievement society, not a disciplinary society where someone tells you you may not do this, but a society where the voice in your head says, you can do more, you should be optimizing, you could be grinding. And because it sounds like freedom, no one's forcing you, you're choosing this. You can't fight it. You internalize it. You become your own exploiter. Han calls it auto-exploitation. The numbers that started as scratches tracking the moon, they now track your productivity, your sleep score, Your screen time, your engagement rate, your credit score, your life expectancy, your everything. And here's what no one tells you. Your brain, that poor, recycled intraparietal sulcus, was never built for this. It was built to look at two piles of berries and pick the bigger one, not to process infinite quantified feedback loops about your own inadequacy. So of course you're anxious. Of course you're burned out. Of course you feel like you're always behind. You are living inside a 20,000-year-old technology that has slowly, inexorably, turned every aspect of existence into a number to be optimized. But here's the thing, and I mean this sincerely. The person who carved the Ishango Bone, she wasn't trying to build an achievement society. She was probably just trying to understand herself, her body, her cycle, her place in the rhythm of the moon. The numbers were a tool, a memory aid, a way to see patterns. And I think we can still use them that way. But we have to remember something that got lost somewhere between the bone and the bank account. Not everything that counts can be counted. Your grief doesn't have a number. Your love for someone doesn't have a number. The feeling of sunlight on your face at 3 p.m. on a random Wednesday. No number. The way a song can transport you back to a version of yourself you thought was gone. Absolutely no number. And I think, personally, that the most radical thing you can do right now is to deliberately, consciously, opt out of quantification for just a few moments a day. Not as a productivity hack, not so you can journal about it later, but because your brain needs to remember what it felt like before the bone, before the clock, before the score. To just see apples. Now, I didn't make this video to give you a life hack. I made it because I think this story, the full cascade from tally mark to anxiety, is something we all feel but no one names. And I want to know, where do you feel the weight of numbers the most? Is it your bank account, your calendar, your step count, something else? Drop it in the comments. Not because I need engagement metrics, though, ironically, yes, the algorithm will reward us both. But because I genuinely think the first step toward unwinding this cascade is naming where it's gripping you. And if you know someone who needs to hear that their exhaustion isn't a personal failure but a 20,000-year-old design flaw, send them this. Not because I'm asking you to smash anything, but because some ideas are worth the wait. I'll see you in the next one. Try to lose count of something beautiful today.